And joining me now is U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Waltz. Ambassador Waltz, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be with you.
It's good to have you back. I want to start with what is happening with the Strait of Hormuz. Iran initially saying it was open, now saying it is closed. Let me ask you bluntly, is the Strait of Hormuz open or closed right now, Ambassador?
Well, you saw real confusion on the Iranians' part. I think that shows the discord within their ranks after devastating attacks on their leadership. The foreign minister says it's open. The IRGC says it's closed. Regardless, it's the U.S. Navy and President Trump as the commander-in-chief that decides what ultimately comes in and comes out. And I think the bigger picture here is that the Iranian regime cannot hold the entire world's economy hostage. They cannot met out collective punishment because of a dispute over its nuclear program. It's something that will not stand. It's something actually in the United Nations that a record 135 countries joined us and joined our Gulf Arab allies in condemning, including Iran's attacks on ports, airports, roads, bridges, hotels, you name it, even civilian neighborhoods with their drones and with their missiles. So Iran is increasingly isolated diplomatically. It's struggling economically with its currency and foreign currency reserves tanking. And at the end of the day, they do not have the cards, and they're coming back to the table for a deal.
Ambassador Waltz, you cite the U.S. Navy, so let me just ask you, is the U.S. Navy in charge of the Strait of Hormuz? Who specifically is in charge right now?
Well, but that's the point. The Strait of Hormuz is an international waterway. Unlike what the Iranians are trying to claim, they've even moved the goalposts and are now claiming that it's a waterway of theirs, which is an absolute violation of international law. Ultimately, it's the U.S. Navy and President Trump that decides what comes in and what comes out.
Okay. And given the concerns over the mines in the Strait of Hormuz, the new reports of Iran firing on tankers, Ambassador Waltz, is it even safe to trespass the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, we're going to make it safe at the end of the day, and it's not only us; it's our Gulf Arab allies. Frankly, the Europeans have had a lot of discussions, but not delivered in actual capability. But you can't have, just take a step back. You can't have a situation where a party to a conflict, regardless of whether you agree with it or not, can close down international waterways, whether it's the Straits of Gibraltar, the Bering Strait, the Straits of Malacca. And this is why we've been so active at the United Nations. And this is why President Trump has said this cannot and will not stand. At the end of the day, the Iranians are not going to decide economic winners and losers. But this is really a favor to the world in many ways, because what we're doing in ensuring that it stays open is ensuring that the economies of Asia and Europe and elsewhere are maintain their supplies and are active. And by the way, there's a humanitarian component here as well in terms of fertilizer, food, and other aid agencies that need that open for the ongoing crises in Africa. So this is something the United States and President Trump is doing to ensure that no regime can try to hold the world's economies hostage.
Ambassador Waltz, let me talk to you about the ceasefire between the United States and Iran, as you know, set to expire on Wednesday. President Trump warned in his post this morning, if there's no deal, the U.S. will, quote, knock out every single power plant and every single bridge in Iran. No more Mr. Nice Guy. If there is no deal by Wednesday, will the president extend the ceasefire agreement?
Well, that's ultimately a decision for the president, and I'm certainly not going to negotiate on national television.
Understood, but is it on the table?
Is it on
the table? Is that possibility on the table?
Everything absolutely everything's on the table, and the president's made it very clear he is prepared to de-escalate this conflict, as he should be. But I just want to get ahead of this other ridiculous and frankly irresponsible narrative that this would somehow constitute a, quote, war crime that we've heard from Democratic politicians, the media, and others in the international community. That is wrong. It's irresponsible. We have a long history of taking down bridges, power plants, and other infrastructure that is powering Iran's military, and they have a long history of conflating civilian and military assets, including hiding weapons caches, rockets, and military hardware in schools, hospitals, and other civilian neighborhoods, which is a war crime on Iran's part. So I just want, we just need to knock that down and stop that irresponsible rhetoric.
But as you know, some Iranian advocates are urging the United States not to target civilian infrastructure. Are you saying the United States is okay targeting civilians, the people of Iran?
Here's number one, a quote Iranian advocate that is advocating for a regime that literally just machine gunned 30 to 40,000
people who are opposed to the regime
in the course of a weekend. I don't take any credibility from Iranian advocates, but secondarily, in the laws of land warfare and the rules of engagement, any type of infrastructure that is being commingled, that is being used to move military hardware, is absolutely a legitimate target, as are power plants, the grid, and other things that are being used to power Iran's war economy, which, oh, by the way, the IRGC controls an estimated 40 to 50% of. So the president will move up an escalation ladder responsibly, as our amazing military will follow those orders with him as a commander-in-chief until Iran comes to the table and really lives up to a responsible deal that the vice president has put on the table. It cannot and will not ever have a nuclear weapon. And by the way, that's not just the United States. There are dozens of UN resolutions over decades where the entire world has said Iran can't have a nuke.
And Ambassador Waltz, just to be very clear, I'm referencing people who are completely opposed to the Iranian regime and yet don't want to see civilian infrastructure targeted. But let's keep moving. Will Vice President
But we have to keep in mind that
Vance...
this is a regime that hides military hardware in homes
Mr. Ambassador, understood. Let's keep moving because we don't have a whole lot of time. Will Vice President J.D. Vance still lead the talks after no deal was reached last week? Will he lead these talks this coming week? Well, look, my understanding from an announcement the president just made is that the team is going over. I'll leave the delegation announcement to the White House. But I got to tell you, the vice president, the president, the entire team is decisively engaged on this. And he put a very reasonable offer on the table. We'll see what the Iranians decide to do. They can choose to be a responsible member of the international community, or they can continue to be a rogue regime that massacres its own people and seeks to hold the world hostage with a nuclear weapon. And I just thank God that the president is getting ahead of this, unlike his predecessors, before it's too late. All right, let's talk about the second ceasefire that was negotiated by the United States between Lebanon and Israel. Friday, President Trump posted on social media, quote, Israel will not be bombing Lebanon any longer. They are prohibited from doing so by the USA. Enough is enough. Prime Minister Netanyahu reportedly caught off guard by the post. Does President Trump now control Israel's military operations? Well, look, the president, the prime minister are in constant communication, as are their teams. And they had a series of engagements and decided, both for their own reasons, to enter into this ceasefire. And let's give Lebanon, this Lebanese government led by President Aoun, a former general in his own right, the chance to finally take Hezbollah down, to finally finish the job, to finally restore Lebanon's sovereignty.
while Iran is on its back foot,
right.
Syria's in a much better place, and the Hezbollah's leadership have been devastated by a series of decisive strikes. Lebanon has never had a better opportunity. And look, these talks were truly historic. I had the honor to be there for the openings of them. I think this should all be celebrated at the amazing potential here.
All right, we have a number of questions to get to, and we're running out of time. President Trump said this week that Iran has, quote, agreed to everything. Iran said that's not the case, but let me drill down with you. Has Iran agreed to hand over its enriched uranium?
Well, look, I'm not going to get into the eaches of an ongoing negotiation that's going to start again within 24 hours. But the president's red lines are very clear that they cannot have 60% highly enriched uranium, which is just a breath away from weapons grade, and there's no reason to have it unless you want a nuclear weapon, number one. And number two, in terms of their enrichment, they cannot enrich not to that level, or the president's been clear that they cannot enrich at all.
Okay, I want to talk to you now about Russian sanctions. This was Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent earlier this week. Take a look.
We will not be renewing the general license on Russian oil, and we will not be renewing the general license on Iranian oil. Because again, that was oil that was on the water prior to March 11th. Right. So all that has been used.
But then by late Friday, the Treasury Department announced it was extending the lift on Russian sanctions until mid-May. So what was the reason for the reversal?
Well, look, Secretary Bessent has been clear that what has been allowed to move is actually out on the water. What is not being allowed to move is coming out of Iranian refineries right now. And that's the same with Russian oil as well.
Why is the U.S. rewarding Russia, though, Mr. Ambassador?
But at the same time,
why is the U.S. rewarding Russia?
That's ridiculous. At the same time, I'm sorry?
Why is the U.S. rewarding Russia by extending these sanction waivers until May? Russia's working with Iran.
Yeah, that's oil, Kristen, that's oil that was going to market. And now, rather than just going to China, it can go to some of our other allies and partners, number one. But number two, what has Russia lost? Russia has lost one of its military partners in terms of its biggest drone provider, Iran, whose military industrial complex has been absolutely devastated. So, by the way, it's this administration that put sanctions on Iran, on Russia's number one and number two oil providers, Rosneft and Lukoil, unlike the last administration. So I don't think anybody could argue that this, if you actually look at the facts and not the rhetoric, that this administration hasn't taken a tough stand to both end the war in Ukraine, but also end Iran's race towards a nuclear weapon.
Okay, it is a reversal of what the Treasury Secretary said from the briefing room. But Ambassador Waltz, thank you so much for being here.
But let's give a fair hearing here. But he also put secondary sanctions on a number of banks so that the money can't move back into Iran's economy. He took decisive action against one of the Iranian regime's relatives that's running a huge dark and shadow fleet, tanker fleet. So he's taken a number of actions in this Operation Economic Fury that is going to have incredible results in terms of continuing the screws on the regime's economy.
All right, Ambassador Mike Waltz, thank you so much for being here today.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.